I am Joshua, 36, and my parents stole my son's future right out from under his nose. Before I tell you about the moment my 84-year-old grandfather made them regret every single decision they've ever made, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I read every single one. It started on a Saturday in June. The heat was already rising off the asphalt in the suburbs of Cincinnati, making the air shimmer. I looked over at the passenger seat of my sedan. My son, Isaac, was vibrating with energy. He's 11 years old, but he still has that little kid spark in his eyes when he talks about things he loves. And he loves baseball. Not playing it, he's got 2 left feet and catches a ball like he's trying to hug a cactus, but he understands the game. He breathes the history. "Dad," he said, clutching a binder to his chest. "Do you think Grandpa Caleb will mind if I take the Mickey Mantle card out of the hard case just for a minute? Just to show the class the texture." I smiled, keeping my eyes on the road. "I don't think that's a good idea, bud. That card is worth more than this car. Maybe 2 of this car. Grandpa Caleb kept it in that fireproof safe for 60 years for a reason." Isaac nodded solemnly. "Right. 1952 tops. The Holy Grail. I'm just going to hold the case up." I wrote my whole speech about the gum stains on the back of the set. I reached over and ruffled his hair. Raising Isaac alone hasn't been easy. After my divorce 4 years ago, it's just been the 2 of us against the world. My ex-wife checked out, and I threw myself into my work as an accountant to keep a roof over our heads. But Isaac, he was my anchor, and that baseball card collection, that was his connection to his roots. My grandfather, Caleb, had moved into a nursing home 3 weeks prior. It wasn't his choice. He was 84, yes, but sharp as a tack. He still did the Sunday crossword in pen. But my parents, Robert and Margaret, insisted. They said the house was too big for him. They said he was a fall risk. They said he needed professional eyes on him. I didn't agree, but I was the son who never got a vote. I was the silent one, the accountant who kept the peace. That silence was about to end. We pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. Well, technically, it was the house Grandpa Caleb built in 1958, but my parents had been living there with him for the last 15 years. It was a nice place. Big oak trees, manicured lawn. The kind of place that screams happy family to anyone driving by. I parked behind a massive, gleaming white shape in the driveway. Took me a second to realize what it was. A brand new, Class A recreational vehicle. It was huge, with chrome mirrors and expanding sides. It looked like a tour bus for a rock star. "Whoa," Isaac said. "Is that Uncle Connor's?" "I doubt it," I muttered. My younger brother, Connor, hadn't held down a job since the Obama administration. We got out. I unlocked the front door. I still had a key, and the cool air of the AC hit us. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. No answer. Just the sound of the TV blaring from the living room. "Come on," I whispered to Isaac. "Let's go get the cards and get out." We walked down the hallway to Grandpa Caleb's old office. I pushed the door open. The room still smelled like him, Old Spice, tobacco, and lemonwood oil. It was a comforting smell, a smell of safety. Isaac rushed over to the corner where the heavy steel safe sat bolted to the floor. "Do you remember the combination?" Isaac asked, bouncing on his heels. "Grandma's birthday," I said. "Never changed it." I knelt. The dial was cold under my fingers. Right to 12. Left to 08. Right to 24. Click. The heavy handle turned. I pulled the steel door open, expecting to see the rows of graded plastic slabs, the binders, the neatly organized history of American baseball. My stomach dropped. It felt like I'd missed a step on a staircase in the dark. Empty. Not just rearranged. Empty. The shelves inside the safe were bare metal. No Mickey Mantle. No Hank Aaron rookie card. No Roberto Clemente. The collection, appraised at nearly $95,000, was gone. I sat there, frozen, staring into the dark void of the safe. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe Grandpa took them? No, he specifically told Isaac he could borrow them for the school project. Maybe he moved them to a deposit box. Then I felt a small hand on my shoulder. I turned. Isaac was looking into the safe, and I watched the light go out of his eyes. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just looked small. Dad. His voice was a whisper, shaking slightly. Is great-grandpa mad at me? What did I do wrong? That question, that single, innocent question broke something inside me. It wasn't anger yet. It was pain. A deep, searing pain that my son thought he was responsible for this loss. No, I choked out. I stood up, my knees cracking. No, Isaac. You didn't do anything wrong. I grabbed his hand. Stay here. I walked out of the office and headed for the kitchen. My footsteps were heavy on the hardwood. I walked in and saw my mother, Margaret, sitting at the island. She was scrolling through her phone, a glass of iced tea sweating on the granite counter next to her. She looked up, her eyes glossing over me like I was a piece of furniture she'd forgotten to dust. "Oh, Joshua," she said, her tone light, breezy. "I didn't hear you come in. Did you see the new RV in the driveway? It's a beast, isn't it?" I stopped at the edge of the counter. My hands were shaking, so I gripped the back of a bar stool until my knuckles turned white. "Where is Grandpa's collection?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Low, dangerous. Mom didn't even look up from her phone. She swiped a finger across the screen. "Oh, that? Your father and I took care of it." "Took care of it? What do you mean, took care of it?" I stepped closer. She finally put the phone down, letting out a dramatic sigh, like I was interrupting her favorite soap opera. "We sold it, Joshua, last week. God, those old paper cards were just gathering dust. Mold, probably. What's the point of keeping them cluttering up the safe?" The air left the room. "You sold it?" "Yes," she said, picking up her tea. "A nice man came by, gave us cash. Well, a check, but good as cash." "That collection belonged to Isaac," I said, my voice rising. "Grandpa Caleb gave it to him. He signed the papers 2 years ago." "You knew that?" Heavy footsteps came from the back porch. The screen door slammed. My father, Robert, walked in, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. My brother Connor trailed behind him, wearing a smirk that looked permanently etched onto his face. "What's with the yelling?" Dad asked, tossing the rag into the sink. "You're upsetting your mother." "You sold the cards," I said, turning to him. "You sold Grandpa's collection. The Mickey mantle, the Aaron, all of it." Dad crossed his arms. He looked me up and down with that familiar disappointment he'd held for me my entire life. "Don't be dramatic, Josh. Your grandfather isn't clear-headed enough to manage his assets anymore. We were just liquidating unnecessary items." "Unnecessary items?" I shouted. "That was Isaac's inheritance. That was $95,000 worth of history." "70,000, Connor piped up. He leaned against the fridge, opening a soda. "We got 70 for it. Quick sale. No hassle." I stared at my brother, 33 years old, unemployed for 3 years, living here rent-free with his wife and 2 nightmares of children. And he was drinking a soda while talking about fencing my son's property. "You sold a $95,000 collection for 70? I felt sick. "To buy what?" "That monstrosity in the driveway." "It's not a monstrosity," Mom snapped. "It's a Winnebago, and we're taking the whole family to Yellowstone next month. Connor's boys need fresh air. They need an experience." "The whole family?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "You mean Connor's family?" "Well," Dad said, shrugging, "Isaac can come too, I suppose, if he stops moping around. But there isn't much room." Connor chuckled. "Besides, what does Isaac need with those cards? Kid doesn't even know how to throw a ball. He's a nerd, Josh. He'd probably just lose them or trade them for comic books." The rage that hit me then was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't the hot flash of temper. It was cold. It was absolute. "Where is the money?" I asked. "Spent," Mom said, smiling again. "Down payment and insurance. We deserve this, Joshua. We took care of your grandfather for years." driving him to doctors, cooking his meals. Those cards are just payback. Compensation for our time. I looked at them, my parents, my brother, standing there in the kitchen of a house they didn't pay for, justifying theft. Compensation. I gritted out. You've been living in his house for free. You forced him into a nursing home so you could steal his safe. Watch your mouth. Dad stepped forward, his chest puffed out. I am your father. You will show some respect. Respect is earned, I said. And you just spent yours on a camper. I turned around. Isaac was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. He had heard everything. His face was pale, his eyes wide and wet. He looked at his grandmother, then at his uncle. You sold Mickey? Isaac whispered. Connor rolled his eyes. Get over it, kid. It's a piece of cardboard. I didn't say another word. Couldn't. If I stayed in that kitchen 1 second longer, I was going to do something that would require a lawyer for a very different reason. I walked over, scooped Isaac's hand in mine, and marched us to the front door. If you walk out that door, Mom called after me, her voice shrill. Don't expect an invite to the anniversary party. I slammed the door so hard the glass pane rattled in its frame. The drive away from that house was silent for the first 5 miles. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I could hear Isaac sniffing in the passenger seat, trying to be quiet, trying to be invisible. That broke my heart more than the sobbing would have. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that white RV chasing us down like a predator. But the road was empty. My mind drifted back to the hallway of that house. Specifically, the wall of photos I had passed on my way to get Isaac. It was a shrine, but not to the family. It was a shrine to Connor. There was Connor at his high school graduation, beaming. Connor at his wedding, holding court. Connor holding his first son, Jace. Connor holding Cole. Me? I was a blur in the background of a Christmas photo from 2008. It had always been this way. I was the practice child, the rough draft. Connor was the masterpiece. When I was 16, I worked nights at a pizza place for 2 years to buy a beat-up Honda Civic that leaked oil. When Connor turned 16, my parents drove a brand new Mustang into the driveway with a red bow on top. He needs reliable transportation for sports, Dad had said when I asked why. When I went to college, I signed loan papers that I'm still paying off today. When Connor went to college, for a degree he never finished, Mom and Dad cashed out part of their 401k to pay his tuition in full. We don't want him starting life with debt, Mom had explained. And then there was the divorce. 4 years ago, when my ex-wife walked out, leaving me with a 7-year-old Isaac and a mountain of emotional wreckage, I called my mother. I needed someone to talk to. I needed a mom. Her first words weren't, "Are you okay?" or "How can we help?" Her first words were, "Well, Joshua, what did you do to drive her away?" A woman doesn't just leave a good provider. I swallowed that memory down, tasting the bile. It wasn't just about money. It was about value. To them, Connor was gold. I was lead. And by extension, Isaac was just there. Dad. Isaac's voice pulled me back to the present. He was looking out the window, watching the suburban strip malls blur by. Yeah, bud. They really sold them? All of them. I pulled the car over into the parking lot of a grocery store. I put the car in park and turned to him. I needed him to understand this wasn't his fault. They did, Isaac. I'm sorry. I failed you. I should have moved them to my place the day Grandpa went to the home. It's okay, he said, wiping his nose with his sleeve. But it wasn't okay. I could see the resignation in his eyes. He was learning the lesson I had learned at his age. In this family, things that you love get taken away. No, I said firmly. It's not okay. Listen to me. Grandpa Caleb gave those to you. We have a document. It's notarized. That means a special witness signed it with a stamp. Legally, those cards are yours. But Grandma said. Grandma is wrong, I said. And Grandma is a thief. I had tried to tell them that in the kitchen. I remembered the look on my mother's face when I mentioned the legal document. It wasn't fear. It was amusement. Sue us? You're going to sue your parents? She had laughed. Over some paper cards? She was banking on the family card. She was betting that I was still that obedient little boy who would swallow his anger to keep the peace. She thought blood is thicker than water was a get-out-of-jail-free card. But she forgot one thing. I'm a father now, and a father protects his cub. I looked at Isaac. We are going to fix this. I promise you. How? I don't know yet, I admitted. But we're going to go see Grandpa Caleb. Tonight. We drove straight to the nursing home. It was a nice facility, I'll give it that. Clean floors, smell of lavender disinfectant to mask the scent of age and medicine. But it was still a place where people went to wait for the end. Grandpa Caleb was in his room, sitting in his armchair by the window. The TV was on, playing a Reds game, but the volume was muted. He was watching the birds outside. When we walked in, he turned. His face, wrinkled like a roadmap of a long life, lit up when he saw Isaac. But the smile faded as soon as he saw our expressions. You two look like you've been to a funeral, he said. His voice was gravelly but strong. Sit down. Tell me. I pulled up a chair. Isaac sat on the edge of the bed. I took a deep breath and told him everything. I told him about the empty safe, the RV in the driveway, the compensation speech, Connor's smirk, the sale price of $70,000. I watched Grandpa's face closely, expecting rage. I expected him to throw his cane. I expected him to yell. But he didn't. He listened. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the head of his cane. His expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. It was the look of a man who plays chess and just saw his opponent make a fatal mistake 3 moves before the checkmate. When I finished, silence hung in the room for a long minute. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. The boy, Grandpa said, nodding toward Isaac. He thinks it's his fault, doesn't he? I nodded. He asked if you were mad at him. Grandpa Caleb turned his gaze to Isaac. Softly, tenderly, he said, Come here, son. Isaac walked over. Grandpa wrapped a frail arm around him. Those cards were just paper, Isaac. Valuable paper, yes, but just paper. You didn't lose my love, and you didn't do anything wrong. Do you hear me? Yes, sir, Isaac whispered. Good. Grandpa patted his back and then looked at me. I'm not surprised, Joshua. You're not, I asked, incredulous. They stole 95 grand from their own grandson. I've lived long enough to know that people show their true colors when money is involved, Grandpa said. He leaned back. I knew your mother felt entitled to my money. I knew your father was weak and would follow whatever she said. And Connor? Well, Connor has been rot in the foundation for a long time. Why didn't you say something? I asked. Why didn't you stop them moving you here? I needed to see, he said cryptically. I needed to know for sure if they were willing to cross the line. I thought they might wait until I was dead. But they got greedy. They got impatient. He reached for the notepad on his bedside table. His hand, usually shaky, was steady as he wrote something down. He tore the page off and handed it to me. Call this number, he said. Ask for Matthew. Tell him Howard Caleb sent you. I looked at the note. Heritage Auctions, Matthew Patterson. Who is this? I asked. The man who appraised the collection 3 years ago, Grandpa said. And the man who holds the duplicate copy of the deed of gift I signed for Isaac. My eyes widened. You kept a copy with the auction house? I didn't trust my safe, Grandpa said with a small, grim smile. Not with your mother having a key to the house. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Now listen to me, Joshua. This is the hard part. I need you to do exactly what I say. Anything, I said. I'll call the police right now. No, Grandpa commanded. No police. Not yet. If you call the police, it becomes a messy civil dispute. They'll claim I gave them verbal permission. It'll be he said, she said for years. Then what do? We wait, Grandpa said. Wait. I stood up, frustrated. They are spending the money right now. They're planning a trip to Yellowstone in Isaac's RV. Let them, Grandpa said. Let them spend every dime. Let them drive that RV. Let them think they got away with it. Why? Because, Grandpa said, a dangerous glint in his eye. When you trap a rat, you don't snap the trap the moment it sniffs the cheese. You wait until it takes the bite. We need them to commit. We need the money to be gone. And we need witnesses. He looked at the calendar on his wall. Your parents' 40th anniversary is in 6 weeks. Isn't it? Yeah, I said. August 12th. Perfect, Grandpa said. Trust me, Joshua. Wait, can you do that? I looked at my grandfather, the man who taught me how to tie a tie when my dad was too busy with Connor. The man who taught me that integrity is doing the right thing when no one is looking. I looked at Isaac. He was watching us, sensing the shift in power. Okay, I said. We wait. The promise of revenge is a powerful sedative. But the waiting is torture. That night, after we left the nursing home, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my small living room, staring at the ceiling. Isaac was in his room. I had checked on him 3 times. He was asleep, clutching his empty binder. I felt a cocktail of emotions. Guilt for not protecting him sooner. Rage, burning hot and bright against my parents. But mostly confusion. What was Grandpa planning? Why wait 6 weeks? The next morning, I called the number on the note. Heritage Auctions. This is Matthew. Hi. My name is Joshua Caleb. My grandfather, Howard Caleb, told me to call you. There was a pause on the other end, then a shift in tone. Professional, sharp. Ah, Joshua. I've been expecting this call. Howard reached out to me yesterday evening. I assume the safe is empty. Cleaned out, I said. They sold it to a private buyer for $70,000. 70. Matthew actually laughed. They got fleeced. I had a buyer lined up for 95, firm. Your parents sold low to get quick cash. Amateurs. Can we get them back? I asked, desperate. Here is the situation, Matthew said. I have the notarized deed of gift in my vault. It is dated 2 years ago. It lists every single serial number of the graded cards. Legally, your parents sold stolen property. That transaction is void. The buyer, whoever they are, is in possession of stolen goods. Once we report this, they will have to return the cards. So why are we waiting? I asked. Because Howard wants to make a point, Matthew said. And because of the house. The house. I can't say more, Matthew said. Attorney-client privilege. But just know this, Howard is 2 steps ahead. Just hold the line, Joshua. Let them dig the hole deeper. So began the longest 6 weeks of my life. I went to work. I crunched numbers. I filed tax returns. I acted normal. But every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. My mother texted me a week later. A picture of the RV parked by a lake. Caption. First trip with the beast. Boys are loving it. Wish you weren't so stubborn, you could be here. I wanted to throw my phone through the wall. I wanted to reply, you are enjoying a vacation paid for by your grandson's theft. Instead, I typed, looks nice. I had to play the game. I had to be the beaten dog. The hardest part was watching Isaac. He stopped talking about baseball. He put his binders in the closet. He started reading fantasy novels, books about dragons and magic, worlds where the good guys always win because they have a special sword. In the real world, he didn't have a sword. He just had a dad who was texting looks nice to the thieves. One evening, about 3 weeks in, I found Isaac sitting on the floor of my room. Dad, he said, do you think they sold the Clementi card? Roberto Clementi, 1955. It wasn't the most expensive card, but it was Grandpa's favorite. It was the card Grandpa bought with his first paycheck from the factory in 1955. He used to tell Isaac stories about Clementi, about his charity, about how he died trying to help people. I don't know, buddy, I said, sitting down next to him. I hope the new owner takes care of it, Isaac said softly. I hope they don't leave it in the sun. Pulled him into a hug. We're going to get them back. I swear. "It's been 3 weeks, Dad," he said, pulling away. He looked at me with eyes that were too old for his face. "It's gone. We just have to accept it." He walked out of the room. That moment crushed me. My son had given up. He had accepted that adults were liars and thieves. I hated my parents then, not for the money, but for killing his innocence. I visited Grandpa twice a week. We never talked about the plan. We talked about the weather, the Reds, my job. But every time I left, he would squeeze my hand and say, "Almost there." Then, 2 weeks before the party, the invitation came. It wasn't a paper invite. It was a message in the extended family group chat. "Mom, 40th anniversary barbecue, August 12th at 5 p.m. Catered. Live band. Come celebrate 40 years of love." Then, a private text to me immediately after. "Mom, Joshua, bring Isaac, but make sure he's dressed nicely. And don't bring up the cards. I don't want a scene. Also, we are not inviting Grandpa." I stared at the screen. "Not inviting Grandpa. Mom, it's too hard for him to travel. He gets confused. We don't want to upset him. It's better if he stays at the home where he's safe. We'll bring him a piece of cake the next day." I laughed. A harsh, bitter bark of a laugh in my empty kitchen. They weren't worried about him being confused. They were worried about him seeing the RV. They were worried about their guilt staring them in the face. They wanted to celebrate their love in the house he built, with the money they stole from him without having to look at him. I drove to the nursing home that night. "They aren't inviting you," I told him. Grandpa Caleb was polishing his glasses. He put them on, looked at me and smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "Of course they aren't," he said. "They think I'm a ghost. Out of sight, out of mind." He stood up. He walked over to his closet and pulled out a garment bag. He unzipped it. Inside was a charcoal gray suit. It looked expensive. Vintage but timeless. "Is that for the funeral?" I asked, joking darkly. "No," Grandpa said. "That's for the party. But they didn't invite you." "Joshua," he said, smoothing the lapel of the suit. "I built that house. I paid for every brick. I don't need an invitation to walk onto my own property." He turned to me. "Call Matthew. Tell him to bring the paperwork. And tell him to bring the lawyer, Nathan. August 12th, 5:30 p.m. "We're crashing the party?" I asked, a thrill of adrenaline shooting through me. "We aren't crashing it," Grandpa said. "We're ending it." The last week leading up to the party felt like holding your breath underwater. You know you have to surface eventually, but you're just watching the seconds tick by. I had to buy Isaac a new dress shirt. We went to the mall. He was listless, dragging his feet. "Why do we have to go?" he complained. "They don't want me there. Uncle Connor just makes fun of me." "We have to go because Grandpa asked us to," I said. "Trust me, Isaac. You do not want to miss this." "Is Grandpa coming?" I hesitated. "Let's just say, Grandpa has a surprise." On the morning of August 12th, I woke up feeling like I was going into battle. I shaved close. I put on my best suit, the one I used for audits with the IRS. I wanted to look professional. I wanted to look like the accountant they always mocked, but who was now coming to balance the books. I picked up Isaac. He looked sharp, but nervous. "Chin up," I told him. "Today is a good day." We drove to the nursing home first. When I walked into Grandpa's room, I stopped dead. The frail old man in the cardigan was gone. Standing there was Howard Caleb, the man who had run a construction firm for 30 years. He was wearing the charcoal suit. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He had a fresh haircut. He was standing straight, ignoring his cane for a moment to adjust his cufflinks. "Grandpa," Isaac gasped. "You look like a movie star." "I look like a man with business to attend to," Grandpa winked. We walked out to the parking lot. Waiting there was a black sedan. Not my car. A town car. Matthew from the auction house was leaning against it. Beside him was a tall man with a briefcase. Nathan, the lawyer. "Gentlemen," Grandpa said, nodding to them. "Mr. Caleb," Nathan said. "We are ready." We formed a convoy. The black town car in front, with Grandpa, Matthew, and Nathan. Me and Isaac in my car behind them. As we drove toward my parents' house, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I kept thinking about the twist Grandpa had hinted at. The house. What about the house? I knew Grandpa had given the house to my parents years ago. That was the family lore. Mom and Dad take care of Grandpa, so Grandpa gave them the house. It was their justification for everything. For the entitlement. For the way they treated me. This is our house, our rules. But Matthew had said something about attorney-client privilege. We turned onto the street. It was lined with cars. My parents had invited everyone. Neighbors, old friends, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Music was thumping. Celebration by Kool and the gang. The irony was almost too much to bear. I saw the glow of string lights over the backyard fence. I smelled the barbecue smoke. The town car pulled up right in front of the driveway, blocking in the massive white RV. It was a power move. Ready? I asked Isaac. Isaac looked at the town car, then back at me. He took a deep breath. Ready. We got out. Grandpa stepped out of the town car. He grabbed his cane, not for support, but like a scepter. He looked at the house he built. He looked at the RV parked on his driveway. His jaw set. Let's go, he said. We walked up the driveway. The gate to the backyard was open. We could hear the laughter. We could hear Connor's loud voice bragging about something. We walked through the gate. The backyard was transformed. Tables with white linens. A catering staff moving around with trays. A live band in the corner. And there, in the center, were my parents. Mom was wearing a sequin dress that cost more than my first car. Dad was in a tuxedo, looking uncomfortable but proud. They were holding champagne flutes, toasting with a group of neighbors. Connor was near the RV, showing the interior to a group of his friends. His kids, Jace and Cole, were running around screaming, throwing food at each other. No one noticed us at first. We were just shadows at the edge of the light. Then Grandpa walked toward the band. He walked right up to the lead singer, who stopped singing mid-verse. Grandpa pointed to the power strip on the ground. Cut it, he said. The singer looked confused. Sir? Grandpa didn't repeat himself. He reached down with his cane and hooked the power cord. He yanked. The music died. The amplifiers hummed and went silent. The laughter in the yard trickled away. Heads turned. 50 people looked toward the stage. My mother turned around, annoyed. What on earth is happening with the... She stopped. Her glass slipped from her hand. It hit the patio pavers and shattered. Crash. Dad? She whispered. Grandpa Caleb stood there, flanked by his lawyer, the auctioneer, me and Isaac. He looked like Judgment Day in a three-piece suit. Hello, Margaret, Grandpa said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden silence, it carried to the back fence. Happy anniversary. Dad rushed forward, his face pale. Dad? What are you doing here? Who brought you? You should be resting. I'm done resting, Robert, Grandpa said. Connor came running over, looking flushed and angry. What the hell? Who cut the music? Josh. Did you bring him? He's supposed to be in the home. He's not a prisoner, Connor, I said, stepping up beside Grandpa. This is a private party, Connor shouted. You can't just barge in here and ruin Mom and Dad's night. Grandpa Caleb turned his head slowly to look at Connor. Private party? He repeated. On whose property? On our property. Connor spat. Mom and Dad's house. Grandpa laughed. It was a dry, cold sound. Nathan, Grandpa said to the man with the briefcase. Would you please enlighten my grandson? Nathan stepped forward. He opened his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like gunshots. The storm had arrived. The silence in the backyard was heavy, suffocating. The guests, neighbors who had known us for decades, relatives who only showed up for free food, were watching with wide eyes. This wasn't just a family spat. This was theater. Nathan, the lawyer, pulled a document from his briefcase. He held it up, but he didn't hand it to anyone yet. My name is Nathan Reed, he announced. his voice projecting like a courtroom orator. I am the legal representative for Mr. Howard Caleb. We don't need lawyers here, my dad stammered, trying to herd the guests away. Everyone, please, just a misunderstanding. Grab some cake. Nobody move, Grandpa said. The authority in his voice was absolute. Nobody moved. Grandpa took a step forward, into the center of the patio light. He looked at my mother. 2 months ago, Grandpa began, addressing the crowd, I was moved into a nursing home. My daughter and her husband said it was for my health. They said I needed care. He paused, letting that sink in. But the moment I left this house, they went into my private office. They opened my fireproof safe, and they removed a collection of baseball cards that I have been building since 1958. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. That collection, Grandpa continued, his voice rising, was legally gifted to my great-grandson, Isaac, 2 years ago. He pointed a shaking finger at Isaac standing by my side. All eyes turned to Isaac. He stood tall, clutching his side, but he didn't shrink away. They took Isaac's property, Grandpa said, pointing now at the gleaming RV in the driveway. And they sold it. They sold a $95,000 asset for $70,000 to a fence, just to buy that. The crowd turned to look at the RV. The trophy suddenly looked like evidence. That's a lie, Mom shrieked. Her face was red, her composure shattering. He's senile. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We were liquidating clutter. Clutter. Matthew, the appraiser, stepped up. Mrs. Caleb, I am Matthew Patterson from Heritage Auctions. I personally appraised that collection 3 years ago. You were in the room. You knew its value. And you knew it was designated for Isaac. You? Who are you? Dad sputtered. I am the man who has the notarized deed of gift in my vault, Matthew said calmly, which makes the sale you conducted a criminal act. It's called grand larceny and selling stolen goods. Criminal? Connor laughed nervously. Come on. It's family stuff. We needed the RV for the family trip. Isaac doesn't even like baseball. Shut up, Connor, I said. It was the first time I had ever told my brother to shut up in public. Felt good. Grandpa wasn't done. You stole from a child, Grandpa said, looking at Mom. Your own grandson. To buy a toy for yourself and your golden boy. We raised you, Dad shouted at me, deflecting. We put clothes on your back. We deserve some happiness. You deserve jail, Grandpa said. You can't do this, Connor yelled. He looked like he was about to charge at Grandpa. I stepped in front of him, squaring my shoulders. Connor stopped. He saw something in my eyes he hadn't seen before. I wasn't the little brother anymore. I can do this, Grandpa said. And I am. He turned to Nathan. The house, Nathan. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The twist I didn't fully understand. Nathan cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Caleb, he said to my parents. You have been operating under the assumption that the title of this property, 142 Oak Lane, was transferred to you 15 years ago when you moved in to care for Howard. We have the deed, Dad said. It's in the safe. You have a copy of a proposed deed, Nathan corrected. A deed that was never signed and never filed with the county clerk. My mother's face went white, like a sheet. What? She whispered. Howard never signed the transfer, Nathan said. He wanted to wait to see if the living arrangement worked out. He forgot to sign it initially, and then, well, he decided to keep it that way. This house, Grandpa said, his voice booming now, is mine. It has always been mine. Every brick, every beam. But we've lived here for 15 years. Mom screamed. We paid the utilities. We painted the walls. And you lived rent-free, Grandpa said. You saved $3,000 a month in mortgage payments for 15 years. That is over $500,000 in saved rent. And yet, you still felt the need to steal from Isaac. Grandpa looked around the yard. He looked at the string lights. He looked at the party guests. I am putting this house on the market, Grandpa announced. The gasps from the guests were audible. You can't, Dad whispered. I can, Grandpa said. And I have. I signed the listing agreement this morning. You have 90 days to vacate the premises. 90 days, Connor yelled. Where are we supposed to go? I have kids. We can't move in 90 days. You have an RV, Grandpa said, pointing to the driveway. I suggest you live in that, while you still have it. What do you mean, while we still have it? Mom asked, trembling. Nathan spoke up again. The buyer of the cards has been contacted. Since the sale was fraudulent involving stolen goods, the transaction is void. The buyer is demanding a full refund of the $70,000 immediately, or he will press charges for fraud. But we spent it, Dad said, his voice trembling. We put it all on the RV down payment and the insurance. Then you better sell the RV, Nathan said. And since it's now a used vehicle, you'll take a 20% depreciation hit the moment you drive it off the lot. You're going to be about $15,000 short. I suggest you start saving. The math hit them. They were homeless. They were in debt. They were facing criminal charges if they didn't pay back the money. Mom burst into tears. Ugly, heaving sobs. Not tears of remorse. Tears of a narcissist who just lost her kingdom. How could you? She wailed at Grandpa. I'm your daughter. And he is your grandson, Grandpa said, gesturing to Isaac. And you stole from him. Grandpa turned to Isaac. He ignored the wailing woman, the stunned guests, and the angry brother. He knelt down on one knee, wincing in pain, to look Isaac in the eye. Isaac, Grandpa said, I am sorry I had to do this in front of you, but you need to know something. Truth matters. Integrity matters. And no one, not even family, has the right to take what is yours. Are you going to send Grandma to jail? Isaac asked, his voice small. That depends on them, Grandpa said. If they pay the money back and return the cards, I won't press charges. But they have to leave my house. Isaac nodded. He looked at his grandmother, who was now screaming at my dad. He looked at Connor, who was kicking the tire of the RV. Okay, Isaac said. I want to go home now. We're going, I said. Grandpa stood up. He looked at the crowd of guests, who were frozen in awkward silence. Enjoy the barbecue, Grandpa said. I paid for the grill it's cooking on, too. He turned and walked toward the gate. I took Isaac's hand. We followed him. As we walked past the RV, Connor lunged toward me. You did this. You poisoned him against us. I stopped. I looked at my brother. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel inferior. I felt pity. Nobody poisoned him, Connor, I said. You guys just finally drank your own poison. We walked out to the cars. The music was still off. The only sound was my mother's screaming echoing into the suburban night. This is the moment that changed everything. When I finally took back control of my life and protected my son. Thank you for being patient and sticking with me this far. You guys are amazing. Please hit the like button and comment 1 below so I know you're with me. It helps more people find this story, and it tells me that my experience means something to you. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to share the rest of this journey and how we rebuilt our lives from the ashes. The drive away from the party was different than the drive there. The tension was gone, replaced by a strange, vibrating adrenaline. We didn't go back to the nursing home. I took Grandpa Caleb and Isaac back to my place. My small, 2-bedroom apartment felt more like a home than that mansion on Oak Lane ever did. Did we win? Isaac asked from the back seat. Grandpa turned in the front seat. We didn't win, Isaac. Family wars don't have winners. We just stopped losing. That stuck with me. When we got to my apartment, I made tea. We sat in the living room. My phone was blowing up. Texts from cousins who were at the party. Calls from Dad. Calls from Connor. I silenced it. So, I said to Grandpa, 90 days. 90 days, Grandpa confirmed. Nathan is serving the official eviction notice tomorrow. They have to be out by November. They're going to be destitute, I said. I hated that a part of me still felt bad for them. It's hard to kill the conditioning of a lifetime. They are adults, Grandpa said sternly. Robert has a pension. Connor has hands. He can work. They will survive. But they will not live off my blood anymore. What about the cards? Isaac asked. Matthew is handling it, Grandpa said. He contacted the buyer. The buyer is a collector in Chicago. He was not happy to hear he bought stolen goods. He's returning the collection to heritage auctions next week. We'll get most of it back. Most of it? I asked. The buyer apparently sold a few singles already, Grandpa admitted. We're tracking them down. But the bulk of it, the mantle, the Aaron, is safe. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. I was at work when Connor showed up in the lobby. He looked disheveled. He hadn't slept. You need to talk to him, Connor said, cornering me by the elevator. You need to tell him to stop. Mom is having a nervous breakdown. She brought this on herself, Connor, I said, pressing the button. We have nowhere to go, Connor shouted. The receptionist looked up, alarmed. Do you know how much rent is? We can't afford a place big enough for all of us. Then get a job, I said. I have anxiety, he yelled. You know I can't work in a traditional environment. And I have a mortgage and a son to raise alone, I said, stepping into the elevator. Figure it out, Connor. Welcome to the real world. I hit the button for the 4th floor. The doors closed on his desperate, angry face. It was the most satisfying moment of my professional life. Later that afternoon, Nathan called me. The parents have agreed to the terms, Nathan said. They are liquidating the RV. They are taking out a personal loan to cover the difference to repay the buyer. In exchange, Howard has agreed not to press criminal charges. And the house. They are packing, Nathan said. They asked for an extension. Howard said no. I hung up. It was over. The tyranny of my parents was broken. That night, Grandpa Caleb moved in with us. I gave him my bedroom, and I took the couch until we could figure out a bigger place. It was cramped. It was chaotic. But for the first time, my house felt full. Isaac sat on the floor, showing Grandpa his fantasy books. Grandpa listened, genuinely interested. You know, Grandpa said, we should sell the house. You are selling it, I said from the kitchen. I'm selling it and I'm using the money to buy a place for the 3 of us, he said. Something with a yard, but not too big, and a trust fund for Isaac. I stopped chopping vegetables. Grandpa, you don't have to do that. I'm not doing it for you, he grunted. I'm doing it so I don't have to listen to your snoring from the couch. We laughed. It was a real laugh, but there was one loose end. A week later, Matthew called. The collection had returned. We went to the auction house to inspect it. Isaac opened the boxes with trembling hands. There was Mickey Mantle. There was Hank Aaron. But there was a gap in the binder. The 1955 Roberto Clemente. Where is it? Isaac asked. I'm sorry, Matthew said. The buyer sold that one immediately to a private party in Japan. We can't get it back. Isaac stared at the empty plastic sleeve. That card was Grandpa's favorite. It was the heart of the collection. I expected Isaac to cry. I expected him to be angry. Instead, he took a deep breath. He pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket, a drawing he had made of the Clemente card. He slid the drawing into the empty sleeve. It's okay, Isaac said. We have the rest. And we have Grandpa. He turned to Grandpa Caleb. I'm sorry about your card, Grandpa. Grandpa Caleb rested his hand on Isaac's shoulder. Isaac, look at me. That card was cardboard. It was a picture of a man. But you are the man. You stood up. You faced them. That is worth more than any card. I looked at them, the old man and the young boy, the past and the future. My parents had the RV for 6 weeks. They had the house for 15 years. But they ended up with nothing. I had a cramped apartment, a beat-up car, and a family that had been through the fire and came out steel. Let's go home, I said. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where that was. November in Cincinnati is unforgiving. The sky turns a flat, bruised purple, and the wind coming off the Ohio River cuts right through your coat. It was the perfect weather for an eviction. I stood on the sidewalk of 142 Oak Lane, holding a clipboard. It wasn't my job to be there. Nathan, the lawyer, was handling the official walkthrough, but I needed to see it. I needed to witness the physical end of their reign. The deadline was 5 p.m. It was 4:45. A moving truck, a budget rental that looked like it had survived a war, was idling in the driveway. It wasn't the luxury movers my mother was used to. It was two guys in hoodies smoking cigarettes, waiting for the last box. My parents looked older. In just 90 days, they had aged 10 years. My father, Robert, was carrying a box of books, his back hunched. He didn't look at me. He just shuffled past, his eyes fixed on the dirty ramp of the truck. My mother, Margaret, was a different story. She was standing by the front door, wearing a fur coat that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of cardboard boxes and defeat. She was arguing with Nathan. "The chandelier belongs to me," she was shrieking. "I bought it in 2010. It is a fixture, Mrs. Caleb," Nathan said, his voice bored and professional. According to the property laws in Ohio, once a fixture is attached to the ceiling, it becomes part of the real estate. It stays. "You are stealing my home," she screamed. I walked up the driveway. The gravel crunched under my boots. "Nobody stole anything, Mom," I said. "You just finally had to pay the rent." She spun around. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her makeup smudged. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation that chilled me to the bone. "You," she hissed. "You did this. You poisoned him. You whispered in his ear." "I didn't have to whisper," I said calmly. "You shouted your intentions loud and clear when you sold Isaac's inheritance to buy a camper." Speaking of the camper, the spot where the massive white RV had sat was now empty. Just a large, dead patch of grass where the sun hadn't reached for 2 months. The financial fallout had been swift and brutal. I knew the numbers because Nathan had kept us informed. They had sold the RV back to the dealership. But, just as Nathan predicted, they took a massive hit. They lost 20% of the value the second they drove it off the lot, plus the dealer fees. They got $55,000 back. But they owed the buyer of the cars $70,000. They were $15,000 short. Plus, they had legal fees. Plus, they had moving costs. They had drained their savings. They had maxed out their credit cards. My father's pension, the salary he had worked 30 years for, was now being garnished to pay off the personal loan they had to take out to avoid fraud charges. They were broke. Not can't go to Europe this year broke. Real broke. "Where is Connor?" I asked, looking around. "He's in the car," Dad muttered, walking back down the ramp. "He's upset." Of course he was. Connor was sitting in the passenger seat of Dad's sedan, wearing sunglasses, scrolling on his phone. He couldn't even be bothered to help them load the boxes. He was the golden child, and golden children don't lift heavy things. They just wait for the next bailout. But the bailout wasn't coming. "It's 5 p.m., Nathan announced, checking his watch. "I need the keys." Mom clutched her purse. She looked at the house Grandpa built, the house she had ruled like a queen for 15 years. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. It was a play for sympathy, a final attempt to crack my resolve. "You have a 2-bedroom apartment in Covedale," I said. "I saw the lease agreement you sent to Nathan. It's a roof. It's heat. It's more than you left Grandpa with when you dumped him in that room." She trembled. For a second, I thought she might strike me. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out the key ring, the one with the leather fob I had given her for Mother's Day 5 years ago, and threw it on the ground. "I have no son," she said. "I know," I replied. "You haven't had one for a long time. You just had a spare part." She turned and marched to the car. She got in. Dad followed. The moving truck rattled into gear. They backed out of the driveway. They didn't wave. They didn't look back. They just disappeared around the corner, leaving nothing behind but a dead patch of grass and silence. I picked up the keys from the dirt. "It's done," Nathan said, making a note on his clipboard. The locksmith is on his way to change the tumblers, just in case. Thanks, Nathan, I said. I walked into the house. It was empty. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare, leaving pale squares where the pictures of Connor used to hang. It echoed. I walked back to the office. The safe was still there, too heavy to move. The door was open. I stood there for a long time. This was the room where Isaac's heart had broken. But it was also the room where the truth had finally come out. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandpa. Grandpa, is the eagle out of the nest? I smiled. Me. The nest is empty. Keys in hand. Grandpa, good. Order pizza. Pepperoni. Extra cheese. I'm celebrating. I locked the door to 142 Oak Lane for the last time. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt like I had just set down a backpack filled with rocks that I had been carrying for 36 years. We spent the next 3 months living in my cramped apartment, and honestly, they were the best months of my life. Grandpa Caleb slept in my bedroom, and I slept on the pull-out couch. Isaac slept in his room, which was now filled with the recovered baseball cards. But we needed space, and Grandpa was adamant. I am not dying in this apartment, Joshua, he said one morning over coffee. The walls are too thin. I can hear you thinking. We're looking, I said, but the market is tough. We have cash, Grandpa reminded me. The house on Oak Lane sold yesterday. Escrow closed. It had sold for $450,000. It was a good neighborhood. The money was sitting in a trust account, waiting. I want land, Grandpa said. Not a lot. Just enough to see the sunset without looking into a neighbor's kitchen. And a porch. A man needs a porch. We found it in February. A ranch-style house about 20 minutes further out from the city. It wasn't grand. It didn't have marble countertops or a chandelier that my mother would fight over. But it had 3 bedrooms. It had a wide front porch with a swing. And it had a finished basement that was perfect for a card museum, as Isaac called it. We bought it outright. No mortgage. The deed was put in a trust, the Isaac Caleb Trust. Grandpa was the trustee, and I was the successor. It was ironclad. No one could touch it. Moving day was different this time. There was no tension. Just me, Isaac, and Grandpa directing the movers with his cane like a conductor. Careful with that box, Grandpa shouted. That's the kitchen stuff. If you break the coffee maker, you're fired. The movers laughed. They loved him. Everyone loved him. He had this gravity about him, a mix of grumpy old man and mischievous sage. Life settled into a rhythm, a healthy, beautiful rhythm. I continued working as an accountant, but I didn't take the extra shifts anymore. I didn't need to. The pressure of what if was gone. Grandpa insisted on paying for the groceries and utilities from the house fund. Save your salary, he told me. Build your own safety net. Don't end up like your father. We didn't hear much from them, but news travels in small towns. I heard from a cousin that Connor's wife, Megan, had left him. Apparently, the rich lifestyle was the glue holding that marriage together. Once the money dried up and they were squeezed into a cheap apartment with my parents, the cracks turned into canyons. She took Jace and Cole and moved back in with her own parents in Kentucky. Connor was working. A real job. He was stocking shelves at a hardware store. A friend of mine saw him there, wearing a red vest, looking miserable. He tried to hide when he saw me, my friend told me. But I made eye contact. He looks humbled. I didn't feel happy about his misery, but I didn't feel the need to fix it either. That was the biggest change in me. I realized that his struggle was his journey. I couldn't carry it for him. And my parents? They were ghosts. They stopped going to the country club, couldn't afford the dues. They stopped hosting parties. They became the people they used to mock. Invisible, struggling, and bitter. But in our house there was light. One evening in April, baseball season started again. The Reds were playing at home. I came downstairs to the finished basement. Isaac and Grandpa were sitting on the new leather couch. Isaac had the binder open on his lap. Look at this stat, Grandpa, Isaac was saying. In 1968, Bob Gibson had a 1.12 ERA. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible in baseball, Grandpa said, sipping his root beer. That was the year of the pitcher. They had to lower the mound the next year because he was too dominant. I stood on the stairs watching them. The generational gap had vanished. They spoke the same language now. Isaac looked up and saw me. Dad, come see. Grandpa is telling me about the time he saw Pete Rose slide headfirst. I walked down and sat next to them. The room smelled of popcorn and fresh carpet. You know, Grandpa said, looking at the TV, I've been thinking about the Clemente card. The mood shifted slightly. The missing card was the only scar left from the war. What about it? I asked. I contacted Matthew again, Grandpa said. I told him to put out a standing offer. If that card ever surfaces, no matter the price, we buy it. Grandpa, I said, that could be $10,000. I don't care if it's 50, Grandpa said. It belongs in this book. He tapped the binder on Isaac's lap. But until then, Grandpa reached into his pocket. He pulled out a slabbed card. It wasn't a vintage card. It was a new one, a modern card. It was an autographed card of Ellie de la Cruz, the Reds' new rookie sensation. I bought this on eBay, Grandpa said, handing it to Isaac. It's not Clemente, but it's the start of the new collection. Your collection, Isaac. The one you build. Isaac took the card. His eyes went wide. Grandpa, this is awesome. Fill the empty spaces with new memories, Grandpa said. That's the secret, kid. You don't look back at the hole. You look at what you can put in it. I looked at my grandfather, and I felt a lump in my throat. He wasn't just teaching Isaac about cards. He was teaching him how to survive trauma, how to rebuild. But shadows have a way of trying to creep back in. 2 weeks later, I was at work when the receptionist called me. Joshua, well, it's your father. He's on line 1. I stared at the blinking red light. I hadn't spoken to him since the eviction. I picked up the phone. Hello, Joshua. Dad's voice was thin, weak. It's your mother. My stomach tightened. What happened? She fell, he said. In the apartment. The carpet was loose. She broke her hip. She's at Mercy Hospital. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Pain is pain. She needs surgery, Dad said, and rehab. Insurance only covers part of it. And Josh, we don't have the deductible. It's $5,000. Silence stretched on the line. I knew what was coming. We were wondering, Dad stammered. Grandpa, he has the money from the house. It's a medical emergency. Family helps family, right? The audacity took my breath away. After everything. After the theft. After I have no son. They were calling for money. I closed my eyes. I thought about the little boy waiting in the hallway while they planned a vacation with his inheritance. I thought about the empty safe. Dad, I said, do you remember what you told me when my wife left? When I was drowning. Josh, please. You asked me what I did wrong, I said. So I'm asking you, what did you do wrong to end up in a position where you have no savings at 65? That's not fair, he cracked. Life isn't fair, I said, and neither is theft. Grandpa's money is in a trust for Isaac's education. It's not a piggy bank for your mistakes. Call Connor. Maybe he can pick up extra shifts. Connor can't. Goodbye, Dad, I said. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, not from fear, from the sheer effort of holding a boundary that heavy. I didn't tell Grandpa about the call. He didn't need the stress. But I realized then that the war wasn't just one battle. It was a siege, and I had to keep the walls high. Time moves differently when you are at peace. The next 2 years blurred into a montage of quiet victories. Isaac started middle school. He grew 3 inches, his voice started to crack, and he finally stopped looking at his shoes when he walked. He joined the debate club. Turns out arguing about facts and logic was his sport. He was good at it. Viciously good. I watched him dismantle an opponent in a debate about renewable energy, and I saw a flash of Grandpa Caleb in his eyes. Grandpa was slowing down, though. The cane became a walker. Then the walker became a wheelchair for longer distances. But his mind remained a steel trap. Every Sunday we had a ritual. We would go to the card museum in the basement, and Grandpa would pick a card. He would tell the story of where he bought it, who was playing that day, what the weather was like in 1958 or 1963. I recorded them. I set up my phone on a tripod and just let him talk. "This is the 1960 top set," Grandpa said to the camera one Sunday, holding up a binder. "Horizontal design. People hated it at first, said it looked wrong. But sometimes you have to turn things sideways to see them clearly." He looked at the camera, then at me. "Like this family, Josh. We had to turn it upside down to fix it." I realized he was giving us a roadmap. He knew he wouldn't be around forever. He was leaving breadcrumbs. One rainy Tuesday in November, exactly 2 years after the eviction, I got a call from the lawyer, Nathan. "Joshua, can you come to my office? Bring Howard. Is everything okay? Just come in. It's about the estate planning." We drove into the city. Grandpa was quiet in the passenger seat. He was wearing his favorite cardigan. When we sat in the conference room, Nathan slid a thick document across the mahogany table. "Howard has made some final adjustments to the trust," Nathan said, "and he wanted you to be aware of the specific clauses regarding the extended family." I opened the document. It was complex legalese, but the gist was clear. Upon the passing of Howard Caleb, the house and all financial assets transfer immediately to the Joshua Caleb Living Trust. A specific bequest of $1 is left to Robert Caleb. A specific bequest of $1 is left to Connor Caleb. $1? I asked, looking at Grandpa. "It prevents them from contesting the will," Nathan explained. "If you leave them nothing, they can argue you forgot them or were mentally incompetent. If you leave them $1, it proves you remembered them and you specifically chose to give them that." "It's the final message," Grandpa said softly. "It says, I saw you, I remembered you, and this is what your loyalty was worth." "And there is a funeral clause," Nathan added. "Mr. Caleb has stipulated that his funeral will be a private service. Invitation only. Security will be hired to enforce the guest list." "You're banning them from your funeral?" I asked. This felt heavy. Final. Grandpa looked out the window at the city skyline. "A funeral is for the living to grieve, Joshua. They don't grieve me. They grieve the ATM machine that broke. I don't want them performing their fake tears over my casket. I want you. I want Isaac. I want peace." "Okay," I said, reaching over to take his hand. His skin was like paper, dry and cool. "Whatever you want." We left the office. On the way home, Grandpa asked to stop for ice cream. We sat in the car, eating vanilla cones in the rain. "You're a good father, Joshua," he said suddenly. I froze. I had spent my whole life waiting for my own father to say that. Hearing it from Grandpa hit me like a physical blow. "I'm trying," I said. "You broke the cycle," he said. "That's the hardest thing a man can do. The river wants to flow the way it always has. You built a dam. You saved the boy. You saved us," I corrected. "No," Grandpa shook his head. "I just provided the ammo. You pulled the trigger. You stood up at the party. You kept them away. You did the work." He finished his ice cream and wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I'm proud of you. I just wanted you to know that." That night, Grandpa went to sleep and didn't wake up. It wasn't dramatic. There was no ambulance siren screaming in the night. I just went in to check on him at 7 a.m. because I didn't smell coffee. He was in bed, looking peaceful. His glasses were folded on the nightstand next to a picture of him and Isaac. The grief was a tidal wave, but it was a clean grief. It wasn't complicated by guilt or unspoken words. We had said everything. The funeral was exactly as he wanted. Small. Private. Just me, Isaac, Nathan, Matthew, and a few of Grandpa's old friends from the construction days. We hired 2 off-duty police officers to stand at the gate of the cemetery. Sure enough, about halfway through the service, a rusty sedan pulled up. My parents, I watched from the graveside as the officer stopped them. I saw my father arguing. I saw my mother crying. Those theatrical, wailing tears. The officer shook his head. He pointed to the road. They stood there for a moment, looking at the small group gathered around the grave. Then, they got back in their car and drove away. Isaac stood next to me. He was 13 now. He wore a black suit that fit him perfectly. He didn't look at the car. He kept his eyes on the coffin. "He's safe now," Isaac whispered. "Yeah," I said. "He is." In the weeks that followed, the house felt quiet, but not empty. Grandpa's presence was everywhere. In the smell of lemon oil in the office. In the half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. We received the inheritance. It was substantial. The house proceeds, his savings, his investments. It was enough to ensure Isaac's college was paid for, enough to let me retire early if I wanted to, and enough to keep us safe. But the real inheritance wasn't the money. One evening, about a month after the funeral, Isaac called me down to the basement. "Dad, look." He was holding the binder. The page with the empty Clementi slot. "What is it?" "I got a package today," Isaac said. "From Japan." My heart stopped. "What?" "Look at the return address." I looked at the package on the table. The handwriting was elegant. From Mr. Tanaka. Inside the package was a note. "Dear Isaac, I purchased a 1955 Roberto Clemente card 2 years ago. Recently, I was reading an article online about a stolen collection from Cincinnati. I realized the certification number matched. I am a collector, but I am also a grandfather. This card has a home, and it is not with me. Please accept this return. No charge. Honor your grandfather." And there it was, in a hard plastic case. The 1955 Roberto Clemente. The corners were sharp. The color was vibrant. Isaac's hands were shaking as he slid it into the empty sleeve. It fit perfectly. The collection was whole again. We sat there in silence, staring at the completed page. "He knew," Isaac said, wiping his eyes. "Grandpa knew it would come back." "He had faith," I said. That night, I realized that the story wasn't about the theft. It wasn't about the RV or the toxic parents or the eviction. It was about the bridge. The bridge between the past and the future. My parents had tried to burn that bridge to keep themselves warm. Grandpa Caleb had rebuilt it, stone by stone, to carry us across. I am 39 years old now. My son is heading to high school next year. He wants to be an archivist. He wants to protect history. My parents are still in that apartment in Covedale. I hear Connor is working 2 jobs now. Maybe they are learning. Maybe they aren't. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I have forgiven them, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I look at Isaac organizing his cards, confident and loved, and I know one thing for sure. The cycle is broken. The spare child became the protector. The quiet kid found his voice. And the old man on the porch, well, he's still watching over us, making sure we don't miss the slide into home plate. Wow. Just writing that ending brought tears to my eyes. It's been a long journey from that empty safe to this moment of peace. If you take anything away from my story, please let it be these 3 things. Legal documentation is love. Grandpa Caleb didn't just trust that things would work out. He notarized papers. He had duplicates. He treated his assets with respect. If you want to leave something to your children, put it in writing. Don't leave room for vultures. Silence is not peace. For years, I stayed silent to keep the peace. All it did was enable my family to abuse me and eventually steal from my son. Setting boundaries, even if it means evicting your own parents, is an act of self-respect. Listen to the quiet ones. Isaac didn't scream. He just asked if he did something wrong. The deepest pain often whispers. Protect the quiet hearts in your life. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to protect your peace? Or maybe you've been the spare child like me. Please drop a comment below with your thoughts, or just type good if you think Grandpa Caleb was the hero we all need. Your interaction helps this story reach people who might be stuck in toxic cycles right now and need the courage to break free. Thank you for listening, for validating my pain, and for celebrating our victory. You guys are the best. See you in the next video.